All right, great. Well, welcome everybody to the Solar Consultant Network's Monday Forum. For those of you just joining the Solar Consultant Network, you might be asking, what is the Solar Consultant Network? Well, a bunch of us here in the solar industry decided it was time to unite together to share insights so that we can collectively really help the adoption of solar industry worldwide. So each Monday, we feature a different guest speaker to share their insights. This week, I am so excited to announce our speaker today, which is Spencer Rosen. Spencer has been in the energy field for a long time. He's done over 1,000 in-home energy advisories. He is the sales manager for Enphase, and today his particular insights that he's going to share with us is really about the battery knowledge. And as many of you know in the solar industries, selling batteries is becoming a bigger and bigger deal. A lot of homeowners are looking for to use it to help shift loads, to also back up their energy once the grid goes down. So without any further ado, Spencer, I'd like to turn the Zoom over to you.
Okay, cool. So it's great to see you. Thanks for being here with me today. I have really connected with so many amazing professionals in the kind of this developing solar industry, right? Where you're kind of more your own business. It's not just working for a company, you're kind of generating your own world of solar opportunities. And it's just been super fun because you guys are using new technology, you're forward thinking, you move quickly. Melissa, one possible audible here is we kind of went back and forth on a couple of different topics. And what I actually had prepared was something that I'm planning on delivering tomorrow as well during a training, and it's really just a little bit of a step back. It is about Enphase microinverters and what makes the microinverter like amazing. I can also kind of grab another presentation. I do all kinds of stuff. If you want to focus on storage, I know we kind of talked about that. I'm happy to do that as well. Is that really the topic we want to kind of focus?
You know, the awesome thing about these Monday forums is we can make it whatever we want. And if you're feeling that the industry right now needs more insights on those microinverters, then I'll definitely yield to your area of expertise. Go for it. And we can do battery trainings another time.
I think that's kind of what I was thinking. Like, this is a good foundation. If we talk about batteries without talking about microinverters and Enphase kind of and what the fundamental components of our batteries are, it might be a little bit out of order. So I think if we focus on this, it'll be a really good asset and really good training content for your community. And then from there, we can do and I'd love to do another one in another month or a few weeks or 2 months, whatever the next availability is.
I love it. Let's do that. So let's start the foundation properly here with learning about the inverters, and that will build us to our skill sets where we can take our battery knowledge to the next level.
Cool. And then I have it all kind of nice or organized with your logo and the whole thing, and it's all ready to go and it's all right here. So that will work out perfectly. So without any further ado, I want to talk about Enphase microinverters. And to do that, I think I'm going to go a little bit back in history and talk about where we've come. So Enphase was founded back in 2006 when the solar industry was very, very nascent. And we really commercialized the first ever microinverter. You could say we invented it. There might have been a few other people playing with that type of technology, but in terms of really scaling it, developing it, building it into a product that the industry can use, really Enphase was the creator of the microinverter. And we ramped up to, a large quantity of these inverters being shipped out, by 2010, 2020, 2011. This is funny. 1 million units now are probably shipped every month, maybe even more than that, right? So this is up to that point. They had shipped 1 million. That was like a big milestone. Now we ship them every month. And the thing that's so exciting about this slide for me to share is that it's through iterative development that the product really improves, right? If you think about the iPhone, the first iPhone was amazing. It was a breakthrough. It was awesome, but if you look at the iPhone today, I mean, it is like so refined. The hardware is so durable. The cameras are so advanced. And so, over time, we've introduced next generation microinverter technology to the point in which we launched our 8th generation microinverter in 2020, and now launched that for the roof application in 2022. So it's through these iterative developments of our product that we've developed such a reliable product, such a high performance product, and a product that right now in the United States, 70% of residential installs, it might be 65, it could be 72, somewhere in that range, are choosing Enphase microinverters for their solar system. So there's a reason we've had such high adoption, and it has to do with a lot of things that we're going to talk about today. But one of the main things is the fact that we've had so much time and practice to get our product right. And of course, every one of these product developments makes things better, faster, smaller, less parts, more processing power, more efficient. The big jump on this IQ8 technology is, the processor, the brains in our newest microinverter is so much faster. Like we said, I think it's 1,000 times faster than the previous version. So, we focus on iterative improvements. And at the end of the day, what that means to you and your customers is they get a great technology that's been evolved and advanced over time. And that is really what technology is, right? You think about a computer today from a computer 30 years ago, it's that evolution, that reinvention, that constant improvement that makes technology, so advanced. Now, this is a slide that 3 years ago when I came on board, someone was like, it's kind of cheesy to compare yourself to Apple. It's kind of a big brand. You sure you want to do that? And I did a little bit of math, and Enphase is about 15 years old. Apple's 40 years old. So I don't want to compare us to Apple of today, because that's not really fair. They've had 40 years and we've had 15. But if you look at Apple in 1989, and you look at where Enphase is today, now we're talking about, okay, well, at that point, computer industry was growing, but it was kind of newer, So Apple's had 40 years to get to where they are today. Where will Enphase be 25 years from now? I don't know. We're really well positioned. We've developed a very revolutionary technology, and we're here to stay. We're the most valuable pure play renewable energy company in the world. We're actually the fastest growing company on the S&P 500 in the last 5 years. Not fastest growing solar company, not fastest growing energy company, the fastest growing company on the S&P 500 in the last 5 years, which is pretty, above Apple, above Tesla, right? Which is pretty remarkable. So let's talk about our solution real quick. We got these amazing microinverters. They're kind of a power plant in a box, right? They actually create a grid from a little device that's about this big. We connect them with these cables. We have our app, we have our batteries, and all of these kind of work together. We also install our systems on commercial systems. It's not a big part of our market, but we're going to grow it. But there are many, many thousands of commercial applications that use our technology across the country. And a lot of the features that we've developed, they're evolving over time, but we have our module level monitoring, right? So you can see each individual inverter and see how much each one is outputting. We just made a really cool update to the app. Our old app was, I think it was like 1.2 stars on, Google Apps. I think our new app is coming in at like 4.6 stars, or like a really high app rating. So the app's getting great reviews. It's beautiful aesthetic. It's easy to understand. And we try to make it a really intuitive experience for homeowners. This presentation is an old school one because we haven't really had to even talk about how great our technology is that much recently, because we've grown so much share and it has been more about batteries, but there's a lot of good meat in here. But I wanted to show you too, if you go to enphase.com and you go into the homeowner button and you click the Enphase app, there's this really cool video here. It's about 8 minutes, and it walks through all the features of the app, how to use it, what you see, how it works, the settings, right? And this is a great tool that I love to share with homeowners if they're considering a system, as well if they are just, having gotten a system and they just got it commissioned and they want to understand how to use their app. It's a great app. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in chat real quick. So if people want access to that, they can go to that link and it will give them access to that page. The other thing we've really invested heavily in is our customer service. Although, it varies based on time of year, time of day, we have got typically our call time down, our hold times down between 5 and 1 minute. Sometimes our call times are less than 1 minute for someone to call in. And a really fun fact about Enphase is that about 50% of the calls we receive are homeowner calls. So if you think about SolarEdge or another inverter manufacturer, a lot of the time they're really, really focused on the installers, and that's great. We want to focus on the installers, make sure they're successful. But the fact that we've also developed our platform and our customer service team to be able to directly support homeowners can often be meaningful, right? Because if the installer goes out of business or if there's an issue that the installer can't handle, we want to also be very, very able to help the end user. Okay, cool. So that's a little bit of a highlight and overview. Let's talk about the advantages of microinverters and Enphase's microinverters specifically. And the way we think about this is PRSSI. It's a fun little acronym. P stands for performance, R stands for reliability, S stands for safety, the other S stands for simplicity, the last I stands for intelligence. So let's walk through them. Let's start with performance. So performance, if you actually look at this study from 2013, we did a side-by-side of Enphase versus SolarEdge, and our product produced about 3% more energy. Now, sometimes people refer to a spec sheet and they say, oh, this spec sheet shows, I'm going to turn that to silent. My phone was silent, but my watch rung. Yeah. I do like Apple. I am a fan. So a lot of times people look at a spec sheet, they look at like different statistics, but one of the main things about Enphase microinverters is they perform so well in the real world because they have this individual by individual panel output. And there are certain kind of nuances that are hard to capture on a spec sheet that our product actually performs well in the real world under those conditions. So I'm going to talk about a few of them here, like try to capture them in a minute. And one of the main ones is true independence. So when a optimizer-based system talks about, oh, we have panel by panel optimization, it's kind of true, but at the same time, they are limited by a central inverter that has to control an algorithm to make all those inverters perform independently. And if you look at a string with optimizer system, each individual optimizer has to be part of a minimum string size, group size of 8. So this is if you're still selling with SolarEdge, which, I respect you if you are, that's fine. It's a really good design training thing that you should know about. You should never have a string of less than 8 optimizers together in any given orientation. Because if you have like an east-facing array that has 8 of them, and then you have, say, a west-facing array that has the other 20 of them, and that east-facing array has one little optimizer that goes down, all 7 of those will stop working because you don't have enough power to turn on the inverter. Now, if you designed it with 4 of them, that would be really, really bad because they wouldn't turn on until the whole other side of the array had enough power to turn on the whole system. So that's just an example of a limitation that exists with a system that has the optimizers connected to one central inverter. And when you have individual microinverters by microinverter, you get that full independence. So one microinverter facing east, everything else facing west, it'll maximize the production based on that individual microinverter. The other thing that is sometimes talked about by a string inverter with optimizer salesperson. I know it's a cheesy photo, but it's kind of fun. Is this minimum startup voltage? They say, oh well, Enphase has a minimum startup voltage. Well, the string inverter actually has to also hit a minimum voltage. And although they say the optimizer doesn't, the string itself does have to hit a minimum voltage. So, microinverters don't even wait for the rest of the way. They turn on, and we actually have something called burst mode. Burst mode is really cool. Most people don't even know about this. Burst mode is a little capacitor, which is like a mini battery in our microinverter that absorbs the DC energy before it can be converted and bursts it out in little packets. So we actually have like no minimum startup voltage because every little ounce of electrons that can be captured get captured, and then we send it out. And what does that mean? It means the system turns on earlier in the morning and it stays on later in the afternoon. So it's a really cool benefit, and a lot of people don't know about it. The other thing when we talk about performance, right, total output over time, is, of course we have module by module efficiency. That's great. This is going to perform the best when it comes to shading, certain cells degrading, temperature differences between different modules. But the other thing that's a major benefit, not just for reliability, but for production, is we have less downtime, right? So if a microinverter fails, everything else is still producing. If a central inverter fails, the whole system's not producing. And we know even if you get a 25-year warranty, probably at year 12, year 13, that central inverter is going to fail. It could take, I've seen 2 weeks, 3 weeks. I've actually heard that some manufacturers have issues getting their replacement products, and it can take 2 months, right? So that's downtime where they're not saving energy, and especially if they got a loan payment, that's a big bummer. So that would, kind of roll back up to you. They'd be probably calling you about, hey, I'm paying this loan, I'm not getting my system working. So with Enphase, we're thinking about like scheduled maintenance. Okay, just so you know, you got 19 microinverters working, one is not working, we'll be out there in 2 weeks. Nobody cares. They'll be like, okay, great. I know that one of my microinverters is not working. I'm going to go out and I'm going to get that repaired in, a reasonable amount of time. And it's like having 1 or 2 cloudy days in a month, as opposed to having a system that doesn't even work, at all for whatever period. And this is becoming even more relevant and more important when we talk about storage, because saving energy is important, right? And saving money is important. A lot of people make the investment based on that. And it's a great investment. But when the grid's down, right, and you need power for your family, man, a total failure is going to have that much more meaning and that much more significance, right? Because you wouldn't be able to charge your battery with the sun if your central inverter is not working, and you probably wouldn't even be able to operate your battery. So we think of ourselves as distributed architecture because there's no individual node of failure, right? It's got this kind of, variety of different components that work together to create the system. And that kind of translates very, very well to our reliability advantage, right? As we talked about performance, let's talk about reliability. And reliability isn't something that happens by chance. It's not some like dice roll that like, oh, it just happens that this, version of the Enphase microinverter is a little bit better than this version of a Solar Edge. It's something that we say we've developed over time, and I'll give you some data to kind of support that. The first thing is that a product has been engineered and built for the roof from the very beginning. So some people say, oh, I don't want to put an inverter on the roof because it's hot up there, or this or that. Although we have tons of tests that show that our systems perform phenomenally well, even in areas like Australia where the temperature gets up to like 145 degrees. We've got a lot of field test data showing that our microinverters were built and perform well in harsh environments. So, if a central inverter was kind of built for garage, they may have kind of, I wouldn't say cut some corners, but, made it less resilient, less robust, right? Less durable. Our product can never like be anything less than, super durable, because we knew it'd be up on the roof. We knew it'd be in harsh environments. And so from the very, very beginning, we chose super high quality components. They have what's called a low thermal footprint, which basically means that they, it's like a heat sink. They remove the heat very, very efficiently from the electronic equipment itself. And this is a cool kind of nerdy, nuanced thing that not a lot of people know about. When you think about a central inverter, it's a high voltage DC current that's being converted. So all the optimizer are coming into one location, and they're being converted from direct current to alternating current. If you just want to visualize that, what that looks like is you have to take a signal and you have to switch it back and forth, right? 60 times per second. That's what creates our grid frequency called 60 hertz. You ever heard of that? Whatever. But regardless, it's switching it back and forth to create direct current to alternating current. And that switch, when you have everything coming together, has a lot of power running through it, right? So that high powered component is under strain when a lot of power is coming through it. And so we designed our system, it's low voltage DC, meaning the voltage that's coming in through that switch is very, very low voltage, and there's a lot of them. So that switch can last longer. And that's why Enphase was able to create the first 25-year warranty in the industry on an inverter. Everybody else has kind of followed suit and tried to now create a warranty, but it's a buy for forgiveness warranty, meaning they expect the product to fail and you're paying ahead of time to pay for a replacement. The other thing that's kind of cool, and even the product I'm showing here doesn't have this level of potting, because we have the IQ7 and IQ8 have a whole new level of kind of enclosure. If you've seen it, it's very kind of almost like I'll show it to you real quick here. It's like a full, potted enclosure. Everything's kind of this polymer. Once we install this, we actually inject a material inside of it and fill it up. And that does two things. One, it creates the most waterproof product in the market. And two, it creates that heat sink that I talked about, because every component is in direct contact with the special polymer that we developed in partnership with Dow Chemicals to remove all that heat and to allow the product to perform in super harsh environments. So this is the reliability by design. This is what we built into the product from the very beginning. But this is even the most exciting thing about it. We designed it for reliability, but we get our quality by incremental improvements. And how do you get incremental improvements? Well, you break stuff. You got to break stuff to figure out what is the weak link. And so when I went through my first factory tour at Enphase in our QA/QC lab, this was 3 years ago, about when I got brought on board, the VP of engineering or of quality gave me the tour, and he goes, "Hey, if you know any engineers who really like to beat up on hardware, like send them over here. We'd love to, we love to beat our hardware up as much as we can." And they showed me these incredible temperature chambers and all these different kind of tools that they use to try to break the product. And when we take our competitor and put them through the same temperature cycling, we basically keep the power on the product and we heat it up and we freeze it and we heat it up and we freeze it and we heat it up and we freeze it, and we see what breaks, and then we go and we send it back to the lab and we say, well, let's get a better component, let's try it again, and then let's do it again and see what breaks again. And then we keep doing that until our product gets super, super robust. And you take the competitor and immediately you'll start to see failures with the same temperature cycles, and all of them will fail up to, when you get up to that 200 temperature cycles, you get 100% failure, while we have a super, super low percentage, even at 600 cycles. So it's pretty amazing. The other thing that's really interesting is that we have this thing called NEMA 6. Now, NEMA 6 is a waterproof rating. It's a special waterproof rating. And if you look at this requirement, NEMA 6 requires that you take a product with the power off, you dunk it in the water, you leave it there for 30 minutes, you pull it out, and you make sure it is working. So what do? Well, we dunk the product in the water with the power on, We thermally cycle the water. It's actually fluid because you can't get below 0 with water. It's like a special fluid. We take it down to negative 22 degrees and up to 150 degrees. We do that 600 times for 21 days. And that's how we test our product. So it's way, way above and beyond NEMA 6 rated. And we've been doing that testing for years and years, and it creates the culture of quality we have, the rigorous testing that we put our products through. When I went to the lab, they had these huge, big containers of microinverters that are stacked to wall, and that's where they do the temperature cycling. This is a small picture of the room. We have a huge quality lab. I think we're actually building another one. Okay, cool. So it gives you a sense of our performance. This is another image I just want to show you. This shows our performance at high temperature. And even in Australia, at 160 degrees, 158 degrees, our failure rate was less than 1%. So that's like the most, like the harshest environment. And even that failure rate, oh, I apologize. That doesn't even say that. It's less than that. It's less than 1%, even got a internal temperature above 158. And none of them got up to 185, which is kind of the level in which, the failures could start to happen. So we have not attributed any of the failures of our product related to heat. So that whole kind of thing about like, don't put them in the heat because that can, like, that's not what, like, the failures that can happen could be from moisture. Maybe our failure rate super, super low. It's 0.0005%, which is 1 in 2,000. So I think about that, like if you have 100 houses with 20 microinverters on each, one house will lose one microinverter, which, I mean, is pretty amazing, right? If you had 100 customers and one called you, one called you to tell you that one microinverter is not working, that'd probably be a pretty low amount of customer service you'd have to manage your existing customer base. And the other thing that's really exciting is that FEMA recommends microinverters, right? They had some hurricanes. They noticed that when the string that's all connected in the loop broke, the whole system turned off. But when a microinverter broke, everything else still worked. So they said, well, if it's going to be, in a high hurricane environment, it's going to be an environment that has, any type of, concerning weather, microinverters are more resilient. Okay, cool. So if I haven't beat the reliability to a pulp yet, here's a few more pictures of our lab. We also do component-based testing. We test each individual component. And as I said, the biggest benefit of our product is we have no single point of failure, right? So other products can break and bring down the whole string. Even when one does break, you can plan the replacement and the customer is not losing money when everything else is not working. So this is how we came up with the 25-year warranty. It's because we test our product and we know it's designed to last 25 years. And there's really no other inverter manufacturer. There are a couple little guys who are making microinverters out there, but they just don't have the time that we have. They don't have those 15 years. They don't have the 8 generations of product. And so, I am tuning our own horn, but when we represent 65% of the US market, I think it's more about conversation about having homeowners feel very, very comfortable with the reliability of the technology they're getting and having them have a great experience and, making sure that they understand that, hey, this is a technology that is really, really tested rigorously, and that, a manufacturer that's publicly traded can't even provide a 25-year warranty without having our own reserve fund that we set aside to cover any cost of warranty based on a third-party analysis done that stands up to, Federal Trade Commission rigor, right? Because if we're publicly traded and we have to have the financials to back the warranty that we're putting in place, because that's I think it's a liability on the balance sheet, however that works, right? But it has to be accounted for, basically. Okay, cool. So, that was my favorite section to always lead when I led this. But let's talk about a few other things that are really interesting. So we talked about performance, reliability. Now we're going to talk about safety. So hopefully you haven't put your tongue to a DC battery lately, but you know that can be quite a shocker. If you get electrocuted by DC power, which you won't do in a circuit because our homes don't have DC power in them, it can mean just at 200 volts, it can mean death. Now, if you stick your finger into a socket, not recommending that, in fact, discouraging that, with AC power, it will buzz you, but it won't kill you. You'll feel a little buzz, you'll feel a little shock. And DC power can actually electrocute you because that AC current is alternating current, and it allows you to remove your finger because it's disconnecting. It's the sine wave of the production is basically always going to zero. So there's a moment where you can just remove your finger when the voltage is at zero. On DC current, it's always at the voltage. There's no changing voltage that would go to zero. So they say DC, being electrocuted by DC, holds on to it, grabs on it, actually sticks. And so DC current is much less safe. When you think about that with a central inverter system with optimizers, you got DC current going all the way down, all the way on the roof, on the outside wall, all the way down to the electrical panel. If a fireman comes and chops through a DC line, if somebody working in the home chops through a DC line, if a homeowner evidently screws through a DC power line, it can be very, very unsafe. When you look at an Enphase microinverter, the only DC power we have is between the panel and the microinverter. It just plugs right in on the roof. It's usually about less than a foot, and it ends up being about this distance when you wrap the wire up. And it's also low voltage DC. So we're never going up to 600 volts because we're already converting to AC at the panel. Maybe we're at 40 volts, 50 volts, right? 60 volts, maybe, right? But we're never up at multiplying multiple panels to create a high voltage DC power. So everything happens in a short distance. All the DC is contained, and the whole run back to the main service panel is AC. The same AC power that you have powering your lights, powering your microwave, powering your oven. So when people bring up concerns about safety, I say with Enphase, you can basically, it's the same kind of power you're running through your house right now. Everything that's in your wall, it's the exact same. In fact, you can use Romex in many cases to wire it up, which is that kind of flexible wire that you see if you ever go in Fanatic or you ever pull out a plug, you can kind of see it. There's like a little sheath around the outside of the wire. It's the same simple electricity that you have in your house today. And it's the same amperages. So your oven uses 50 amps. Well, typically that would be a 2 or 3 branch solar system, which is average. So there's not a big evolution. And it's one of the reasons a lot of installers from the get-go did like Enphase, because they could hire a new electrical guy who didn't know as much about DC power and train him up really quickly, because all the math, all of the power is the same type of AC power that they're typically used to. And the only connection that's different is you just plug in the panel to the microinverter, right? And pretty intuitive. There's a cool video that's on YouTube, and it shows an arc at 200 volts and how, I don't know if I can open it right now. Let me see. Yeah, I'll do a quick demo here. Videos are always fun, kind of break things up. I'm not going to do the whole 2 minutes, but I'll just show you. The design of this is to take basically a voltage and bring it apart and see if you can create an arc, right, which can create a fire. And so when you do that at 200 volts DC,
simulating a wiring fault, the arc gets hotter and hotter.
You can see that just little small connection can create a fire a lot easier. If you look at the fires that happen on top of all those Walmarts, those were optimizers, right? I don't think they market it very much, but it was a DC fire. It's very, very rare to have an AC fire. When you're down at DC voltages closer to Enphase voltages,
here is another look at the two
that
scenarios
it doesn't
side by
sustain,
side.
right? It just kind of is a little spark. You'll see it here. Watch.
Fault risk in the two inverter technologies.
Oh, you couldn't even see it. It was a tiny, tiny spark. There you go. There you
The
go.
nature of a microinverter is that the
Right. So it basically, DC powers are not as safe as I mean, there's very few safety issues in general in the industry, and I don't always bring this up because you don't want to put any fear into a homeowner regardless, talk about fires, but sometimes they do, right? And you want to know that, and you want to feel really good about the technology that's behind that. Okay, cool. So that's probably all that needs to be said about safety. But this, I guess, it's just to emphasize, this is, these are those sites that they said over the past year, the company said less than 1% of the sites exhibit abnormal behavior. I don't know, 1% is kind of high to me. Like, if it's a fire risk, I mean, if it's a failure rate, I guess it's okay. I mean, we have 0.05%. So that's 1/20th of 1% in a microinverter issue, but that's a failure of performance. That's not a fire, right? So 1% is kind of high. When I saw this, I was like, 1%. That doesn't sound too good to me. So the other thing on safety is rapid shutdown is becoming more and more of a requirement, meaning it's being required to shut down a system at the panel level, not at the central level, but each individual product needs to be shut down. And our system, obviously, with microinverters was kind of built that way. Some of the other companies that had central inverters like SMA had to create a special product that would shut things down at each individual microinverter. So anyways, if you hear about rapid shutdown, Enphase is engineered from the beginning and was born for rapid shutdown. Okay, cool. So that's safety. We talked about performance, reliability, safety. Let's talk about simplicity. Okay, design is super simple. Once you pair a microinverter and a panel, boom, you're off to the races. You don't have to think about branches. You don't have to think about string sizes. I mean, in general, it's super, super simple. You can scale quickly. Now, when you get into storage, obviously that's a much more advanced conversation. But when you talk about solar only, it's like as simple as it can get. So, you don't have to take into account different azimuths. You don't have to take into account shade, really. Like, it'll do the best with whatever shade's there. You have a lot of flexibility in terms of branches and where you put them and how many there are. And the other thing I really like about, Enphase is add-ons are super, super easy. If you want to add on 4 microinverters or 6 or 8, you have that flexibility. If you want to do that with a central inverter, at some point you'll hit the maximum of that inverter. Now you have to add a whole nother central inverter. So it's a lot less scalable. It's a lot more challenging to add on a system when you have a central inverter that's kind of fixed to a specific power output, while a microinverter has individual microinverter outputs, right? So you just add on as many as you need. And of course, all Enphase systems are kind of built ready for backup as well. The other thing that people like to do is, as I said, it's super easy to expand their system. I use this as a selling point today. And if you can create a future business model where, maybe 3 years or 5 years down the road, you're going back to your existing customers and saying, hey, would you like to add on an EV charger and 8 more panels? Or would you like to add on storage and 8 more panels? It's one of the drawbacks of sales, when you're selling a specific like high ticket item, like a 20, 25, 30, 35, 50, $100,000 project, is, you lose your customer the moment they purchase from you, right? And now you have to go find a new one. So it's nice to have a network where you can go back to them at some future date and provide add-ons for them. Okay, cool. So let's see what else. Add-ons, we talked about that. Simplicity too. We've done a lot of cool things in terms of being able to turn on the system remotely. Enphase was one of the first companies to do that. I think that's more common nowadays. We also, just so you know, on our microinverters have an instant RMA approval process. So somebody can actually see an issue from CS department, can click, and it'll run through an algorithm that checks the data from the system against our known failures and it instantly approves it and sends out a replacement. So we're not quite there yet on the batteries and other advanced technologies yet, but we're going to get there, right? Because we know the power of speed when it comes to addressing issues. And so that's why we've implemented the system. I'm not going to spend a ton more time here, but yeah, we already kind of talked about customer service. Okay, cool. One more really fun thing that I don't always talk about is that, you know, when you connect your monitoring, you're connecting it to the internet, right? It's got to be connected to the internet. Now you have cell modems, but cell modems are a little bit less, I wouldn't say reliable, but they're slower. The data's not as up to date, right? Wi-Fi or Ethernet is the best way to connect because you're getting great high-speed data, you're getting the most accurate data, and you're getting the fastest data. So, you know, when a cell modem, for example, reaches its life of 5 years, well, if you have a system that's, say, you know, like not able to connect to Wi-Fi very easily, you got to send out a new cell modem, or sometimes you have to roll a truck to replace that cell modem. Enphase, we saw that a few years ago, and we designed our system to reconnect to Wi-Fi as simple as any home device, right? Any smart home device. So as simple as you can take a Google Home or a, you know, Alexa, and basically open up the app and click connect to Wi-Fi and put your password in. That's what we developed. So you can basically take your Enphase app, you open it up, you find your Wi-Fi network, type in your password, and boom, you're on the internet. So while other cell modems are failing and you tell the homeowner, I'm sorry, it's going to be 3 weeks for us to get your data back or your monitoring back, or we're going to have to charge you to send out a truck roll, with Enphase, you can say, okay, well, have you tried to connect for your Wi-Fi? Okay, here's the link for a quick 3-minute video. Boom, it's intuitive to connect via Wi-Fi yourself. The other fun thing is even our cell modem is a USB connection. So if a homeowner ever did want to mail that out to them and just kind of take it and put in a new cell modem, they could do that as well. The cell modems in other technologies are typically, you have to take off the whole inverter front, plug it in to the actual like wire frame of the chip, right? The hardware there. It takes like a qualified electrician as opposed to a simple plug and play. Okay, cool. So we talked about performance, reliability, safety, and simplicity. We're going to talk about intelligence now. You know, microinverters are computers. They really are. They're super advanced and they can provide incredible data and insight. This RMA thing is a great example of it. Another really cool example is that Hawaii updated their grid requirements. This was 3 or 5 years ago. And it was a big deal for all the inverter manufacturers because all of a sudden they updated it, and the inverter manufacturer had to have a grid profile that would work with the new standard. So all the other manufacturers were running around like crazy trying to, you know, go to every single site with trucks and update them, and they had to put software in there. Enphase was the only company that updated their whole fleet overnight, no questions asked, remotely, right? We brought it up to standard. So we've always thought of the right way to approach this as, you know, kind of like with Tesla's, you know, auto, you know, software enhancements on their vehicles. We think of this as an energy system, and it needs to be up to date to grid standards. It needs to be able to take advantage of new grid opportunities. There's some kind of way to sell energy back or to do some kind of energy arbitrage. And so we've developed our technology to really be prepared for those types of changes that need to happen quickly. So, you know, this, the fundamental overview is that, look, we focus on performance. We're focused on reliability, security and safety, simplicity and intelligence. These are really simple kind of acronyms. If you're ever, you know, asking a customer about, you know, what's important to them, you can, if they answer any one of these things, you can kind of like pick up on these talk tracks and run with them. You know, it's all about giving the customer peace of mind and having them feel really, really good about the investment they're making. And at the end of the day, the solar panels are kind of dumb. They don't really do anything. They just sit up there on the roof. They work really well. They're designed really well. They're really, kind of advanced. But in terms of all the intelligence and the monitoring and the customer support and the, grid profiles, all of that happens to the inverter system. So it really is important that you have a very, very intelligent system. And that's what Enphase is. So anyways, I'm going to stop here. Hopefully this was super fun and interesting and, can give you little nuggets that you can pull from when you're in a conversation with the homeowner. And kind of open it up to Q&A. Is that okay, Melissa, if we give people 5 or 10 minutes for any Q&A?
All right. Well, thank you first off so much. That was super insightful about learning about microinverters and particularly Enphase. And so I really hope that everybody in the Solar Consultant Network, when you're reviewing this and listening to this, you're really gathering those key nuggets of info to really help you feel more confident when you're out selling and consulting with homeowners. So thank you for that. I really appreciate that. And I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now.